Most people think family businesses are built on trust. Mine was built on tradition, and that tradition had one unspoken rule. The men sat at the head of the table, and the women brought the coffee. I grew up a Whitmore in Charleston, South Carolina, where the family name opened doors at banks, country clubs, and political fundraisers. Our firm, Whitmore Financial Group, wasn't just a business. It was a dynasty. It was founded by my grandfather after World War II. It grew into a multi-million-dollar empire under my father, Charles. Our historic home in the old village was lined with oil paintings, framed photos of handshakes with senators, and the kind of antique furniture people put behind velvet ropes. From the outside, it looked perfect. Inside, it was a different story. I had graduated at the top of my class from Wharton with dual degrees in finance and economics. Yet when I joined the firm, I was placed under the guidance of my cousin Tyler Mann, who barely scraped. Through business school, my reports were called too complicated, my strategies overly technical, more than once. I watched an uncle or cousin present my ideas as their own and receive applause while I sat quietly in the corner. I told myself it was temporary, that if I kept proving my worth, the recognition would come. I didn't realize it yet, but the real lesson of my life wasn't about the market or investments. It's about the moment you stop asking for respect and start claiming it. If my family thought I was just another Whitmore riding on the coattails of our name, they couldn't have been more wrong. While they were busy polishing silver for charity galas or spending weekends at the lake house, I was building something they didn't even know existed. I'd learned early on that in business, leverage is everything. And the only way to have leverage in a family like mine was to make sure you had something they couldn't take from you. So while my relatives were financing golf memberships and redecorating second homes, I was pouring every spare dollar and every ounce of energy into a private investment portfolio, one that had nothing to do with Whitmore Financial. It started small, my first year out of college. I put $15,000 into a small solar technology startup run by a former classmate. Within 2 years, it had tripled. That win gave me the seed capital and the confidence to start hunting for more opportunities. Renewable energy, emerging tech, healthcare innovation. I sat in coffee shops with founders, pored over business plans at my kitchen table, and built relationships with people who valued my mind instead of my last name. By the time I was 30, my personal portfolio had grown to $17 million, diversified across the industries my family barely understood. I didn't advertise it. There were no champagne toasts, no Instagram posts. In fact, I went out of my way to make my life look modest, driving a practical SUV, wearing classic suits. Skipping the designer handbags my cousins loved to flaunt, what I didn't hide was my work ethic. Most nights I stayed in the office, long after the lights went out, running simulations and refining financial models. Some of those models evolved into 7 patented algorithms for investment forecasting and risk assessment patents I filed under my own name, my own attorney, separate from the firm, and then there was the home. On paper, it belonged to a limited liability company. In reality, it was my sanctuary, a restored 3-story brick house in Savannah's historic district, complete with original hardwood floors and a 3rd-floor office with a view of the river. I renovated it quietly, adding a fully equipped conference room and state-of-the-art security. It was here, not at the Whitmore headquarters, that I met with a small but fiercely loyal team people I had handpicked and bound by airtight non-disclosure agreements. We didn't just handle my investments. We managed a discreet roster of high net worth clients who had nothing to do with the Whitmore portfolio. Many of them had signed personal service agreements that gave them the option to follow me if I ever left my family's firm. Over the years, that list grew to include $400 million in client assets, quietly, without fanfare, under the radar. I knew I was playing a long game. As long as the family assumed I was just another cog in their machine, I could keep building. In peace. Every boardroom slight, every stolen idea, every condescending pat on the shoulder only fueled me further. Sometimes I wondered how long I could keep it up living this double life, balancing loyalty to the family name with loyalty to my own future. But the truth is, I didn't mind the wait, because deep down, I knew the day would come when all the late nights, all the patience, all the careful planning would pay off. And when that day came, I wouldn't be walking into the room asking for a seat at their table. I'd be walking in. With my own table, the breaking point didn't come with a blowout argument or a public betrayal. It came quietly, like most of the Whitmore family's decisions, dressed up as what's best for the business. It was our quarterly review, held in the mahogany-paneled conference room at Whitmore Financial. I'd spent weeks preparing a strategy presentation for one of our most valuable clients, a plan that could increase their portfolio returns by double digits. I'd run the simulations twice, stress-tested the models, and even prepared a simplified version in case anyone claimed it was too technical. 15 minutes into the meeting, my cousin Tyler breezed in, coffee in hand, phone in the other. Without so much as an apology, he launched into a story about a breakthrough conversation he'd had with one of my clients. I had asked him to sit in on a single preliminary call while I finished my projections. Now, in front of the entire family leadership team, he was presenting the account as if it had been his all along. My father leaned back in his chair, smiling. "That's the kind of initiative we like to see," he said, clapping Tyler on the back. I sat there, watching the room nod along, a neatly printed report still untouched in front of them, when it was finally my turn. I barely made it to my second slide before Uncle Robert interrupted. "Laura, this all seems unnecessarily complicated." "Clients come to us because we keep things simple," Aunt Linda chimed in. "Exactly. People don't want to be buried in charts and numbers." I took a breath and answered evenly. "Our client surveys show they do want more sophisticated strategies, and if we don't adapt, we risk losing them to firms that already are." That was when my father's pen started tapping, a silent signal that my time was up. "Laura, theory is one thing, but we deal in practical realities here," he said. "This isn't theory," I replied. "I've already implemented this with the Westbrook portfolio, and they've seen a 14% return in just one quarter." Instead of acknowledging the results, he narrowed his eyes. "You did this without authorization," reminded him that we'd discussed it a month earlier, but he waved it off. Tyler jumped in with a simpler approach, which was nothing more than a watered-down version of my work, minus the parts that actually made it viable. The room lapped it up. By the time the meeting ended, my strategy was shelved. Tyler was tasked with developing his idea, and I was left with the familiar taste of defeat in my mouth. Later that week, the final insult arrived not in a meeting, not even in a phone call, but in a family group text. After considerable discussion, my father wrote, "We think it would be best if Laura steps away from client management for now. This isn't permanent, just a chance to realign with the Whitmore way." I read it twice, my thumb hovering over the screen as the responses started to pour in. "Smart move. I agree completely. Happy to take her accounts in the transition." Even my mother chimed in with, "We just want what's best for everyone." Not one person questioned the decision. I typed my reply slowly, deliberately. "Understood. I'll respect that decision and step away from the family fund, too." It was short, professional, and it carried a bombshell they didn't yet understand. Because stepping away from the family fund didn't mean shifting my investments. It meant pulling out my entire contribution, and with it, the liquidity they were counting on for a major real estate deal. That was the moment I decided the rules had changed. They had taken my seat at the table. Now I was going to take the table. With me, I didn't waste time. Within an hour of sending that group text, I was logged into the secure banking portal for the Whitmore Family Fund, as one of its primary contributors and an administrator. I had full withdrawal rights my relatives had clearly forgotten. I possessed. The numbers stared back at me. $4.2 million in principal, plus $1.7 million in growth directly tied to my own investments over the years. All told, nearly $6 million over a third of the fund's liquid assets. With a few clicks, I initiated the transfer into one of my personal accounts. The bank asked for confirmation twice. I didn't hesitate either time. I also sent a formal notice to the family's attorney, citing the exact section of our fund agreement that allowed a contributor to withdraw with proper documentation. I copied myself on a separate email account, storing the proof somewhere the Whitmores couldn't touch. The family fund had always maintained at least 50% in liquid assets for flexibility, meaning my withdrawal wouldn't bounce for lack of cash, but it would gut their ability to move quickly. And they needed to move quickly, because that same week, the Whitmores were in the final stages of closing on a $20 million commercial real estate deal in downtown Charleston. Deal requiring a hefty cash down payment from the fund. Without my share, they were suddenly short by millions. I knew the bank's protocols. Any transaction over $50,000 triggered alerts to all administrators. So I counted on one thing: the Whitmore's tendency to skim past notifications until it was too late. That Friday evening, I poured myself a glass of wine, closed my laptop, and let the sun set over the Savannah River. My phone was on silent. By 7 p.m., messages were trickling in. "Laura, what is going on? Did you authorize a transfer? Call me immediately. This is unacceptable. Reverse it now." By 10 p.m., the tone had shifted from annoyance to outright panic. Father called 3 times in a row. I ignored all of them. At 2:15 a.m., a voicemail came through. His voice strained. "The bank has frozen the account. We can't access a dime. Call me back right now." The freeze was standard procedure for a transaction of that size in T-fraud protocols, but to the Whitmores, it was a disaster in motion. The Henderson Real Estate Group, their partner on the deal, wasn't known for patience. If the down payment wasn't made by Monday morning, the project would collapse by sunrise. I had 89 missed calls and over 100 text messages. Some were furious. "You've sabotaged your own family. We'll take legal action if we have to." Others tried guilt. "Your grandfather would be ashamed of you. You're letting millions slip away just to prove a point." And then there were the ones that almost made me laugh. "We need to talk this through like adults." From the same people who had ousted me from my role via group text, I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I drafted a single, precise message to my father. "I'm honoring your decision. You asked me to step away, and I have. I've withdrawn my personal contribution as allowed under the family fund agreement. The bank freeze is temporary and will lift once their process is complete. I've already submitted my documentation. I will be available to discuss on Monday at 9 a.m. in my home office." Then I shut my phone off completely. That weekend, the Whitmores would scramble. They'd call emergency meetings, beg the bank for exceptions, maybe even try to tap into personal credit lines. But no matter what they did, they'd hit the same wall. The only way to salvage the Henderson deal was to go through me, and for the first time in my life, the Whitmore family needed my approval. By Saturday morning, the siege was in full swing. I woke to the scent of fresh coffee and the quiet hum of the Savannah River outside my window. My phone, once switched back on, immediately came alive, buzzing and chiming until it nearly slid off the counter. 64 missed calls, 127 text messages, 17 voicemails. The first few were pure anger. "You've crossed a line, Laura. This is sabotage, and you'll regret it." Then came the guilt trips. "Your grandfather would never have tolerated this. We're family. This isn't how family behaves." And finally, the bargaining. "We can fix this. Just call us. Talk before the Henderson deal blows up." I didn't reply to a single one. Instead, I took my coffee to the porch, watched the morning light spill across the water, and reminded myself why I was doing this. For years, they had dictated the terms, what I could manage, what ideas were acceptable, and when I was allowed to speak. For the first time, the terms were mine. By late morning, they'd escalated. My father apparently gave my personal cell number to several clients, telling them there was a temporary technical issue with some accounts. That was a step too far. I spent 2 hours on the phone reassuring clients that their accounts were completely separate from the family fund, unaffected, and still performing well. I stayed professional. No airing of dirty laundry. No hint of the Civil War happening inside the Whitmores. These were relationships I'd built over a decade, and I wasn't going to let the family's desperation damage them. Meanwhile, my phone kept lighting up with new family messages, each one more frantic than the last. "You're going to ruin us. This isn't the way to prove your point. Call me, please. Even my Aunt Linda, who'd been one of the first to agree with removing me from client work, suddenly shifted her tone. She sent a long, syrupy message about admiring my talents and wanting to support each other as women in finance. I almost laughed. Where was this solidarity 2 days ago? By Saturday evening, the reality was starting to sink in for them. The Henderson deal was days from collapsing, and the bank freeze meant they couldn't touch the remaining funds in time. Months of planning and a projected $3 million in profit were slipping through their fingers. Then came a text from Anna, my younger cousin, and the only one in the family who'd ever really understood what I was up against. Good for you. They never appreciated you. Coffee next week. That one made me smile. I sent back a simple yes, but the siege wasn't over. At 9:30 that night, my phone rang again. It was Jonathan, the family attorney. His voice was calm, measured, the opposite of the chaos I'd been hearing all day. Laura, he said, I've reviewed your withdrawal. Legally, everything is airtight. But you've created a serious operational problem for the family. Your father wants me to ask if you'd consider restoring the funds in exchange for a renegotiated leadership role. I'm not making that decision tonight, I told him. We'll talk Monday at 9 a.m., as I said in my message. He hesitated. He's also mentioned possible legal action over intellectual property and client relationships. That's an empty threat, and you know it, I replied. My patents are in my name, and my personal service contracts are ironclad. Jonathan exhaled. Yes, I've advised against pursuing it. I'll relay your position. By Sunday morning, the Whitmores had shifted tactics again. My mother left a tearful voicemail about family loyalty. Uncle Robert sent a gruff text, saying I was overreacting to a simple restructuring. Tyler didn't bother hiding his resentment, firing off, "You're blowing this way out of proportion." The final move came that night. My security system pinged someone was at the door. On the camera, I saw my father. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair a little messy, the confident posture I'd known all my life, replaced with something closer. To defeat? I opened the door but didn't invite him in. The Henderson deal falls through tomorrow at 9 a.m. if we don't have the funds, he said quietly. It's $3 million down the drain. That sounds like a business problem, I said evenly, and it needs a business solution. Monday morning, 9 o'clock. Bring whoever you want from the leadership team. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. 9 o'clock. When I closed the door behind him, I realized something had shifted forever. For the first time in my life, my father had come to me in need, not the other way around. Monday morning arrived cool and clear, but the air inside my Savannah home felt charged like the moments before a summer storm. I'd been up since 6 o'clock a.m., arranging my dining room into a makeshift conference space. A long polished table was set with neatly stacked folders at each seat loan terms. Financial summaries and copies of the family fund agreement. Fresh coffee steamed in a silver carafe beside a tray of pastries. Every detail was deliberate. I wanted them to know they were stepping into my boardroom now. At 8:30 sharp, my security system alerted me. Front door motion detected. I glanced at the monitor. My father was in front, flanked by Uncle Robert, Aunt Linda, my cousin, Tyler, and Jonathan, the family attorney. They looked like a corporate firing squad. I waited until precisely 8:59 before opening the door. Come in, I said simply. No small talk, no fake smiles. As they stepped inside, I caught the flicker of surprise on their faces. None of them had ever been here before. Their eyes swept over the restored hardwood floors. The original oil paintings, the clean, modern lines of the conference setup, they were seeing for the first time. A life I had built entirely without them. Dining room's ready, I said, leading them in. My father instinctively moved toward the head of the table, but I stayed standing at that position, forcing him. To take the seat to my right, Jonathan opened his laptop, ready to mediate. My father cleared his throat. We're here to resolve this quickly. The Henderson deal. I raised my hand, his own signature move when cutting someone off in meetings. Before we discuss any specific deal, we need to address the larger situation. I've withdrawn my contribution from the family fund. This is my right under section 7.3. The bank has confirmed the transaction is valid, and the freeze will lift by noon today. Uncle Robert jumped in. This is ridiculous, Laura. You're holding the family hostage over hurt feelings. I turned to him calmly. This isn't about feelings, it's about value and respect. For 8 years, I've generated consistent, above-market returns. My division brought in 62% of company profits last quarter. My client satisfaction ratings are the highest in the firm, yet I was removed from client management via group text without discussion based on feedback. That doesn't exist. Aunt Linda tried to soften the blow. Honey, we just wanted to get the basic decision communicated first. We were going to talk about it in detail at the retreat. Retreat I wasn't invited to, I reminded her. Tyler smirked. Come on, Laura. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Did you really have to blow up a major deal over? I didn't blow up anything, I replied evenly. I withdrew my personal contribution. If that alone can sink a deal, then maybe the family has been relying on me more than it admits. Jonathan interjected. Perhaps we focus on immediate solutions, then address longer-term issues later. The Henderson deadline is hours away. I nodded. Fine. I'm prepared to wire $5 million to the family fund today, enough to cover the down payment with a buffer. But this will be structured as a loan for my personal holdings at standard market interest with specific repayment terms. A stunned silence filled the room. My father finally said, "You're going to charge your own family interest?" "This is a business transaction," I said. "That's how Whitmore Financial has always operated. I'm offering terms any outside lender would envy, especially on this timeline." Jonathan glanced at my father. "She's right. It's reasonable, Uncle." Robert's face turned red. "This is extortion." "No," I corrected. "This is negotiation." My father's jaw tightened. "Fine, Jonathan. Draft the loan agreement. But after this, we expect you to return to the company and reinvest in the fund." I shook my head. "Not on the table. My future involvement will require an entirely new agreement. We'll discuss that after the Henderson deal is secure." The message was clear. The balance of power had shifted. By the time they left, the loan agreement was signed, the transfer initiated, and the Henderson deal saved. But they all knew, whether they'd admit it or not, that the Whitmore family had just stepped into a new era. And this time, I was the one setting the terms. The day after the Henderson deal was saved, kept my promise. I stepped back. My 1-month leave from Whitmore Financial began quietly. There was no dramatic exit, no slammed doors, just the soft click of my home office door closing behind me as I shifted my focus entirely to my own firm. For the first time in years, I wasn't splitting my attention between my personal business and the demands of the family. I spent mornings reviewing portfolios with my small Savannah-based team, afternoons meeting with startup founders, and evenings actually enjoying my life. I hiked the Blue Ridge Mountains on weekends, something I'd been too busy to do for years. I had dinners with friends who had only ever seen me in a rush. I even started dating a thought that had felt laughable during my endless 60-hour work weeks. The freedom was intoxicating. But it wasn't just about leisure. That month was also about preparation. If the Whitmores wanted me back, they were going to have to meet me on equal footing. My team and I created contingency plans for every possible outcome. If I returned a detailed list of terms, from leadership authority to voting rights in the family fund, if I walked away, a streamlined process for transitioning. The $230 million in client assets that could legally follow me if they tried to fight, legal strategies, public relations statements, airtight documentation proving the independence of my intellectual property. It was the kind of planning the Whitmores had never bothered with because they assumed I would always play along. Meanwhile, cracks began to show in the family business. Jonathan, the attorney, called twice to check in and mentioned, in his careful way, that some projects were behind schedule without my oversight. A few clients had voiced concerns about delayed reports or incomplete analysis. The Henderson deal was moving forward, but just barely. The bank had taken its time unfreezing the fund, causing strained relationships with their partners. And then there was Tyler. Word reached me that his simpler approach to a major client portfolio had underperformed by 8% in the first month. No one said it outright, but I could imagine. The conversations happening behind closed doors. One bright spot in that month was Anna, true to her text message. We met for coffee early that first week. Away from the glare of the family, she was a different person, more open, more confident. She told me she'd been secretly interviewing with architectural firms in Charleston and Atlanta. I haven't told anyone else, she admitted, stirring her latte. But seeing you stand up to them, it made me realize I've been waiting for permission that's never going to come. They'll try to talk you out of it, I warned. I know, she said with a small smile. Know what's possible. We met twice more that month, and each time I saw her resolve strengthen. It reminded me of my own younger self, the one who'd been so sure that hard work alone would earn respect. By the third week, the tone from the Whitmores had started to shift. The early anger and defensiveness gave way to cautious outreach. My father sent a short email, no accusations, no orders asking if we could have a productive conversation at the end of my leave. Aunt Linda sent a handwritten note praising my business acumen and suggesting the family needed fresh perspectives. Even Uncle Robert, who had called my actions ridiculous, passed along a message through Jonathan that maybe there is a way forward. I knew better than to mistake these gestures for a change of heart. In the Whitmore world, you didn't admit you were wrong, you simply adjusted your strategy. Still, the fact they were adjusting it all told me my absence had hit harder than they expected. When the 30 days were up, I was ready. I chose the meeting location myself, private room at an upscale Charleston restaurant. No Whitmore offices, no home field advantage for them. I even requested a round table, eliminating the symbolic head of the table my father always claimed. As I stood outside that room, waiting for them to arrive, I thought back to the group text that had started. They'd remove me without a word of warning, confident they could sideline me without. Guess consequence. They were about to find out just how costly that confidence had been when the Whitmores arrived at the restaurant. They came as a group, my father, Uncle Robert, Aunt Linda, Cousin Tyler, Jonathan the attorney, and to my surprise, my mother and Cousin Anna. It was the first time in my memory my mother had attended a high-level family business meeting. Anna, on the other hand, looked quietly determined, her eyes meeting mine with a flicker of encouragement. We exchanged polite greetings and took seats around the round table I'd requested. No head of the table, no hierarchy. My father glanced at it, then at me, and I caught the faintest hint of a smile. He understood the symbolism. Laura, my father began, his tone measured. Over the past month, we've had time to reflect on the situation. We recognize the business has benefited from your contributions in ways we haven't fully acknowledged. We'd like to propose a new arrangement, one that we believe better reflects your value while preserving the family legacy. He nodded to Jonathan, who handed each of us a folder. Inside was a detailed restructuring proposal. The plan called for the creation of Whitmore Capital Management, a new autonomous division of the firm. I would serve as president and CEO, with full control over investment strategies, client relationships, and staffing. The division's profits would be shared separately from the family's traditional pool, ensuring my earnings reflected my performance, not the collective's politics. It didn't stop there. The proposal also outlined a complete overhaul of the family fund's governance. From now on, voting rights would be proportional to each member's financial contribution. No more equal say for someone who hadn't contributed a dime, Jonathan spoke up. Your patents and proprietary systems would remain your personal property. With licensing agreements in place for use within Whitmore Capital Management, your independent clients would be merged into the division, but your personal service contracts would be honored exactly as written. I looked up from the folder in leadership succession. My father nodded. Based across all divisions. Promotions determined by performance metrics and client outcomes, not seniority or family ties. I took a moment to let that sink in. For the Whitmores, this was seismic change. Uncle Robert shifted in his seat. I want to acknowledge something. Laura, I've been resistant to your methods because they weren't how we've traditionally done things. But the results speak for themselves. I was wrong to fight change that clearly benefits our clients. Aunt Linda added, the business needs to evolve, and you've shown us how. Even Tyler, looking uncharacteristically subdued, spoke up. I've been reviewing your strategies. There's a depth I didn't fully appreciate before. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We don't always say it, but we are proud of you. I listened without committing to anything. This was still a negotiation, and I wasn't going to be swayed by sentiment alone. I'll need time to review this, I said finally, and I'll have my legal team go over every detail. Of course, my father agreed. We're not asking for an immediate decision. We're wrapped up with polite handshakes. As the group filed out, Anna lingered, her voice low. Whatever. You decide. You've already changed things more than you realize. Over the next week, my team and I combed through the proposal line by line. We negotiated specific terms, clear authority boundaries, safeguards to prevent interference, and a written exit strategy if things ever reverted to the old ways. When we finally signed, it was with those modifications in place. Whitmore Capital Management was born. My independent business merged in under my leadership. My voting power in the family fund now reflected my investment. The Whitmores had learned a hard lesson about taking my contributions for granted. And I had learned something too sometimes. The only way to get a seat at the table is to build a table of your own and make them come to you. The first year of Whitmore Capital Management was nothing short of transformative. Freed from the constant second-guessing and political maneuvering of the old family structure, my team moved fast, testing innovative strategies, expanding into new markets, and refining the algorithms I'd spent years perfecting. By the end of the year, our division had outperformed every other branch of Whitmore Financial, bringing in record-breaking returns and attracting clients from across the country. Even more surprising, the family began to adapt. My father, who had once dismissed my work as too theoretical, now asked my opinion before making major moves. We still had our clashes, old habits die hard, but they were different now. When he disagreed, it was about the strategy, not about whether my voice belonged at the table. Anna made her move too. She left the family firm to join a Charleston architectural firm, finally putting her degree to use. I invested in her startup design studio, and for the first time, she was working on projects she actually cared about. Some things didn't change. Uncle Robert still grumbled about the old days, and Tyler had a hard time swallowing the fact that his division wasn't leading the profit charts anymore. But the difference now was that the structure we'd put in place gave me the ability to protect my work and my worth, no matter how they felt about it. One evening, nearly a year to the day after that infamous group text, my father and I were reviewing quarterly results in my office. He set down the report and looked at me thoughtfully. You know, he said, when your grandfather handed me the business, he told me something I never really understood until now. The best legacy isn't preservation, it's evolution. I think you've shown me what he meant. I smiled. Evolution is harder than preservation. It means admitting the original form wasn't perfect and having the courage to change it. He nodded slowly. And you had the courage, I didn't. For me, the journey had never been just about money or titles. It was about finally understanding that respect is not something you wait for, it's something you claim. You don't have to raise your voice or burn every bridge. Sometimes. You simply have to build something so strong and undeniable that the world and even your own family has no choice but to recognize it. If you take nothing else from my story, let it be this. Know your worth. Protect it fiercely. And never be afraid to walk away from the table if the terms don't honor your value. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to take a stand to make people truly see your worth? Share your story in the comments below. And if you want more real-life stories about courage, reinvention, and claiming your place in the world, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got more coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss them if you'd like. I can also compile all 9 segments into one continuous, polished script, so it reads like a single flowing narrative ready for YouTube storytelling. Would you like me to do that next?